Hello, and welcome back to Honorable Mentions. I'm Emily Barker,
And I'm Gianna Cocovinas.
and today we have our first faculty member on the show, Dr. Christina Carlson.
Welcome.
Well, I'm your first faculty person?
Yes, you
Oh,
are.
I did not know that. All right, so added pressure, that's fine.
No.
What an honor to be your first faculty guest. I love it. I hope I will not be the last.
No, definitely not.
Hopefully
yeah.
not. And so Dr. Carlson just recently received an award for her visionary teaching from Collegium. And so that's part of the reason why we had her on the show today. But Gianna and I have talked about her love for Dr. Carlson
Yeah.
before.
Sung her praises many a podcast.
Yes.
It's mutual podcast listeners.
And so I think he is a very fitting person to have on first. In addition to that, we work pretty closely with her as co-chairs of Sigma Tau Delta. And so, Dr. Carlson, why don't you talk a little bit about your role with Sigma Tau Delta?
Yeah, well, first, I would like to say thank you for acknowledging the award. This is an award that Dr. Papenrock, the director of the honors program, nominated me for. He was one of Iona's representatives to Collegium. And as a result, he is aware of kind of what they do and thought that my work with mission at Iona would be fitting. And so I just want to acknowledge him for taking the time to nominate me. And so hopefully we can use this award, which does come with some funds to do programming at Iona. So we can hopefully use that to do some great things for students once we get the details hammered out. So very grateful for that. So, and I should just say that I have known Emily and Gianna since their very early days in the honors program.
Yeah.
They were both my students in 102 when we had the interrupted semester. So they both were troopers, and also Cameron over there, who's sitting there in the background. You can't hear him, but trust me, he's here. We're all in that section. And so they got a little bit cheated of the in-person experience of Honors 102, but carried on like troopers, and then went on, Gianna and Emily did, to take my Disney Princess course immediately after as a sort of virtual thing. So they were also very good sports in terms of dealing with, having to shift gears and deliver that as an online course, and now have come back as gluttons for punishment, and are now taking my Chaucer class. So we have a long and storied history together, and it is exciting to see how it continues to unfold. But yes, and now I get to work with them with Sigma Tau Delta, the English Honor Society, fondly known as STD.
Yes, we have to work in some
Yes,
event with there.
because literature is contagious.
That should be our slogan.
It totally should be our slogan. It's at least my unofficial slogan.
Brilliant. Yeah. A stroke of genius.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's what happens
perfect.
when you're an English major,
I guess
right?
so.
That's where your mind goes.
Wordsmith over here. Yeah.
Exactly. But so it was very exciting to get to work with them in this capacity. And I have to say, considering we are coming back from a COVID year where nothing really happened because people weren't able to gather together, I think we've had some pretty smashing successes this year. We had our St. Oran's Day observation, which I hope becomes an annual thing. So that was for Halloween. The girls did a wonderful book. It's not really a donation. What would you call that event?
Blind date with a book?
Well, that's coming up for
Yeah.
Valentine's Day, but the one that you did during, don't judge a book by its cover.
Right. Yeah.
As part of
Week of the
Week of the Peacemaker. Yeah.
Mhm.
So encouraging people not to make decisions about appearances through literature. So again, one of literature's many uses. And then we had, you guys just had a tea, a holiday tea at the English department. And we are really hoping for a lot of Sigma Tau Delta activity in the spring. I know we already have blind date with a book set up for Valentine's Day. Gianna here has applied to give a paper at the national convention. So we'll see, fingers crossed on that. And I'm trying to convince Emily to submit a paper for one of their publications. But I think getting Iona students who are wonderful, and I'm sorry, can pull their weight along with students from any other school. You want to put our best students side by side with kids from Harvard, with kids from wherever. I think ours are going to be right up there. So I think it's time for us to kind of take our Sigma Tau Delta profile and go regional or national. So I think we're looking forward to to submitting to their publications, to their conferences, to maybe even identifying some roles in regional or national student leadership. And we think we may have taken one step toward that.
Yes,
because
I was just about to bring that up.
yes, because Emily and Gianna both gave some very excellent presentations at Moravian College's annual undergraduate conference in medieval and Renaissance studies, where we happened to meet the national director of Sigma Tau Delta, as well as one of their other sort of senior officials. And so we're officially on the radar now, and
That's
hope
really
that
funny.
yeah, I was fangirling
And
a
Dr.
little
Carlson
bit.
was running up to me. She's like, "You're never gonna believe who I met." And I'm like, "Who?" And then we all ran collectively and like huddled around her, saying
Yeah.
hi. And yeah, that was really funny, really fun time.
It was very, but it's like, of all the people to have at
I
this conference, I'm like,
know.
I happen to have with me the two co-chairs of the new Omicron chapter. And I'm like, of course, new Omicron. We had to get that a Greek letter.
Yeah.
Although I suppose
Perfect
we're
timing.
gonna cycle through all of them before long. So
Yeah, maybe.
whatever.
Yeah, no, that was definitely a lot of fun.
Yeah,
Definitely.
so aside from potential networking opportunities with people you don't even know who are going to be there, why else do you think the Moravian Conference for Undergraduate Medieval Studies is like specifically such a good one to bring students to, and why we traditionally bring students to that one?
Oh my goodness. Well, I actually think, I mean, I am your guest speaker today, so I will answer this, but I suspect that either and both of you could answer this just as well, because I'm going to be basing my answer on things that you have said to me over the course of the weekend. I mean, this is a conference I've been taking students to. But like I said, the first student I took there is now a mother of 3. So that should give you some perspective. But they started hosting this conference to give undergraduates a taste of what life in the academy looks like, what it is like to give a paper, to get feedback on a paper, to hear a keynote address. These are things that are so much a part of academic life. And yet, right, I think faculty sometimes forget that their students don't necessarily have access to those aspects of academic life. And so I think it's really really wonderful to provide those kinds of opportunities for students. So Sandy Bardsley and John Black at Moravian have been doing this, again, English and history, because that's a winning combination. Shout out to my wonderful medieval colleague, Dan Theory, with whom I've been teaching forever. So, you can't go wrong with that combination. Have been doing this conference for ages, and Dr. Papenroth sort of found out about it and has been really encouraging honors students to come and present, knowing that everybody writes a medieval paper. All honor students write a medieval paper in 102. And so it's our participation has kind of grown as a result of that. But I think it's wonderful. I think it's wonderful, first of all, just to see what that looks like, right? And as Gianna pointed out, first of all, doing MOPs really makes presenting a paper so much easier. And I have to say, you can tell in our kids that this is not their first rodeo. They know how that feels. Even if it's their first conference, it's not their first presentation. And so if you're wondering why you're doing MOPs, this is one reason you're doing MOPs. Someday you may find yourself in a position to have to present an argument in front of people, and you will know how to do that. But it's also an opportunity, right, to see what the MOP looks like in a professional context, because we heard, I think, a pretty kick-ass keynote address on shrews, scolds, and sapphires, which was essentially a clinic on, it was everything, right? Like, I mean, this is how to do a presentation. Because she was working from a formal paper, but it did not feel stilted. It did not feel formal. She was very conversational. She was very engaging to the audience. Her question and answer session was fantastic. right? She had great visuals. I mean, so these are all the things these are all the components of an MOP, right? But the topic, right? This is a great example of how the Middle Ages is relevant to now, because sadly, right, some of the stereotypes about women and women's anger, particularly toward men, is not there. They haven't disappeared, right? They may be called different things now, but they have not disappeared. And I thought the keynote speaker did a really good job of showing that, and how, in a 21st century American context, the added dimension of race sort of has been gotten folded in with gender, and Black women in popular media really are so often depicted as these sapphire figures, right? As these scolding, emasculating women. And yet, as the presentation was talking about, you have this sort of these media representations, but then when you look at how Black women actually fare in real life when it comes to the law, and how these representations of them put them at such a horrible disadvantage when it comes to dealing with law enforcement. And this is really, the speaker was able to trace that right back to the Middle Ages. And so these things, just because we have gone ahead in time 600-700 years, doesn't mean things have changed.
Yeah. I know I was talking to Emily about this, but just like watching her speak and hearing how she kind of takes these questions and gives such a beautiful, eloquent answers back, it was just really inspiring, because we're going into our senior thesis, so we're getting our ideas together, but it was just really amazing to see her speak and the way she handled herself. It's like an MOP has grown up, the way you said it after she finished. So it was just very amazing, breathtaking, awe-inspiring to just see. I'm envious, and because Emily and I are going into academia, so it's like that's our future coming in.
It is your future, and she was a tremendous role model. And I'm like, Carissa, what was her last name?
I don't
This
know.
is terrible.
Temple University.
Harris. I'm like, Thomas. No, it wasn't Thomas, but it was something with 2 syllables that ended in an S.
Yeah.
And I'd say I was not familiar with her work, but I will certainly be checking her work out, because because she was really inspiring. So now we understand why we do MOPs, and I hope to see a similar performance on thesis day next year from the 2 of you. So now that you have this model.
Yes, definitely. Dr. Carlson is my thesis advisor for my senior thesis.
And so she is a glutton for punishment. Emily. Glutton.
And so I think I'm definitely going to be pushed a bit, but all good, because it means I'll have all the better strong thesis to present.
I know I had a question. And we were, during our ride to the conference, we were talking about classes that you're taking and classes that Emily and I want to take. What classes, like you mentioned your monster class that you would like to teach, like what classes do you see yourself teaching in the spring and also in the fall? Because then they are teaching a Disney princess class.
I know what I'm teaching in the spring, because these schedules have to be in like way before I'm thinking about them. So so I'm definitely teaching my Disney princess class in the spring, and teaching honors 102 and teaching honors composition. So I will be having many of you in honors land in my classes next year or next semester. And then I don't actually know what I'm on the schedule for. I think I'm on the schedule for like a general medieval study, an upper level medieval studies course in the fall, because Dr. Beckwith, who is the current chair of the English department, I mean, there's a rotation. And so there are reasons that things have to get offered. And I basically say, schedule me for whatever needs to be scheduled. But I did express to him when we were talking about schedules, my desire to teach 2 classes, one, which is actually how Emily got to be my advisee. I want to teach a course on English social satire using Chaucer and Austen. So I call it my Chaustin class, that I've never taught, but that I want to teach, but that I may not have to teach if Emily just says everything, and then it's done and you can just read her thesis. And then I want to teach a course on monsters, because I don't just believe this. I think it's kind of a known thing. And we actually heard a paper about this, a really excellent paper about how monsters really reflect, whatever societal anxieties are at a given time, which is why, monsters from the 19th century don't look the same as monsters from the 9th century, because the society was afraid of different things. But I would love to do a kind of chronological study of that, starting with the ancient Greeks and going right up through the current time period. And, we just learned about a great book called The Mere Wife.
Yeah.
That is a modern sort of take on Beowulf. And so we're putting that on the Sigma Tau Delta book club list right after Circe, which of course is another retelling of a classic monster story. So and monsters are a great, they are a great site for retelling, right? I mean, Grendel, John Gardner's Grendel, it was an early example of this kind of thing. Because what was really feared and misunderstood in one time, right? Because the social anxieties change, we end up being in a place where we can re-examine that. And the things about Grendel that were horrifying, to an Anglo-Saxon audience, like in the 70s, people were like, oh, the outsider, well, like, that's not such a bad thing. Like, we're going to kind of embrace him and like him. And we can do that with Wide Sargasso Sea. We were talking about Wide Sargasso Sea, that actually a former honors student, Jill Baldessari, wrote on for her honors thesis several years back in the before times, before COVID. Yeah, right, exactly. Circe certainly does this. And so, we were talking about this in class the other day, that like fan fiction, which is such a sort of popular thing now, and people tend to think of it as a thing that is, part of the internet generation, has actually been around forever. You could look at classic texts. You could look at the Aeneid as Homerian fan fiction, right? You could look at Dante as Virgilian fan fiction.
Self-insert.
Right, exactly.
Put myself up there, right, with the hero or the epics.
So I think there are ways in which we really can think about our own moment and see it in some of these earlier things, which is why it's great to read a book like the Mere Wife in a Sigma Tau Delta reading group, and to teach a class on it. Because I would ask, what are our monsters now, and what do they say about us?
That's amazing. I really hope you teach it before we leave.
Dr. Beckwith, did you hear that?
Yes.
If you're listening, Dr. Beckwith, please let me teach that course before these girls graduate.
I'll go to.
All right,
I'll
excellent.
make a petition.
We'll have a petition. Sounds like a plan. Well, I think the princess class is going to be taken out of rotation for the moment, because we really haven't had a new princess movie. And so I think we could very easily substitute it for substitute a monster class
for princesses.
for that. Yes, exactly. Well, and I mean, let's face it, right? I mean, talk about retellings. We were saying this in the car, right? Maleficent is one of the most successful live action, retellings of a Disney story, and it's told from the perspective of the villain. So, even in our own time, we can embrace Maleficent. She is much more popular than Sleeping Beauty ever was, except for Gianna. Gianna loves Sleeping Beauty.
Oh, I do. I love the artwork in it,
It is beautiful.
I love it. Yeah, the fairies.
I am so glad that you did loop back to the Disney Princess class, because for those of you who don't know, Dr. Carlson is currently writing a book, or I believe wrote a book and is currently in the process of revising a book about Disney princesses, and specifically how the movies and the stories participate in the exchange of women. So would you be willing to give us like a little bit of a sneak peek at the arguments?
Yeah, of course.
Or like something you're really proud of writing?
Well, I'm not sure I'm proud of it yet. I'm not sure we're there yet.
We're proud of it for you.
I'm proud that I managed to write something that is book length. And I am, we can talk again after the whole thing is revised. And again, these wonderful students who both have been through the class and are excellent writers, have offered to have a look at it for me once I make some edits, so they can tell you for themselves. But just to give a kind of background on it, right? The book idea actually came out of, this actually goes back to, many of you will know I have a daughter who is 12 right now, and when she was young, we used to watch Disney princess films together, and people would have inevitably give her Disney princess stuff, because that's what you do when you have a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old daughter, right? It just happens. And somebody gave her this Ariel doll, like a baby Ariel. And like, if you've ever been to the mall, you've been to a Disney store, you've seen these like, princesses as toddler dolls. And she had legs, right? She was wearing a dress and had these little shoes on. And I was like, looking at this doll, and I'm like, there is a problem here, because of course Ariel would not have had legs as a toddler. She would have been a mer child. And so this got me to thinking about how Disney, translates these texts, not just in language or in time, but in genre, and changes them for their own purposes, right? And then the narratives get translated or changed again once these princesses kind of enter what I call the marketplace, right? Where Disney makes so much of its money, right? I mean, the money does not stop with the films, right? The films become an additional source of revenue through all of the merchandising. And so I kind of had that idea rattling around in my head for a while. And then I started teaching a class where we started with this premise of looking at, how the movie changes the text and then how the merchandise changes the narrative of the film. But as I started to watch these films again with a critical eye, I noticed that the idea of the marketplace actually emerged as a theme that I was seeing in all of these films. Like in every film, in one way or another, there is a way in which these princesses have to negotiate um, as players in what I'm calling very broadly a marketplace. I mean, that in some cases, like with Jasmine, she is in an actual marketplace. In others, it's exactly the idea of the exchange of women or women's labor. And all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, this idea of women as objects of exchange, which has been around forever, right? I mean, Gianna and Emily know where we recently finished Troilus and Cressida, and the idea of exchange of women is such a part of that text. And so this is something that's been around for a long time, but I started really noticing it as a trope in these films. And so the book is really exploring this idea of princesses in the marketplace. That is the title of the book, and how over time, of course, the way these princesses negotiate their place in the marketplace changes, and yet I don't know that princesses can really escape it, right? Because whatever the outcome of their actual narrative is, right, they're going to get sucked back into it in the marketplace after the movie is over, because that's where Disney is making its money. And so I'm not, maybe I'm being overly pessimistic, but I'm not sure that princesses, however modern or liberated they might seem, or feminist they might seem, I'm not sure they ever actually get out of the marketplace. I really don't think they can.
It's so interesting. It's like a never-ending
cycle. It's a cycle that they are stuck in.
Oh, I was really excited taking that class, and I'm definitely going to be stopping in a few times the classes. I want to stop in for the Moana one, the Mulan one.
Open invitation. Once you take it, like, you can always come back. You have like a lifetime membership.
Swipe my card at the door.
Exactly. Come on in.
Yeah, for sure. Any questions on it?
I think that wraps up this episode. Thank you, Dr. Carlson, for being on.
Well, thank you for having me. This was such a pleasure. And again, such an honor to be your first faculty guest. I did not know that walking in. And so it's, like I said, yeah, true. Well, we have a long history together, ladies. So I appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit about what I do and how it relates to what you guys do. And I look forward to keeping that going as you hit the midpoint of your junior years and look ahead to what's next. Very exciting, and all of the fun stuff that comes after. I feel very confident in saying that you are laying a really strong foundation for yourselves in terms of the work that you do, and the energy and intelligence and the diligence that you bring to it, and that I have no doubt that someday, should you choose to, you can be offering a keynote at a conference and being inspirational to some young women in the audience, and perhaps some young men as well, with your own work someday. So keep it up. Well done. Get through the end of the semester.
We all will. We'll get
Hopefully.
there. Another week left, but yeah, we'll get there.
Absolutely.
As always, if you would like to appear on an episode of the podcast, please reach out to Cameron, myself, or Dr. Paffenroth. We would really love to have you on and see your ideas. As you can tell, we have a very varied range, from more academic episodes such as this one to media reviews. So really, we are looking this is an open call for anybody who would like to appear on an episode of the podcast. And Gianna, to wrap things up.
Onwards and upwards, guys. See you soon.